Wanted to get to something else here, and this has to do with potentially malfeasance on the part of staff in the public service here in the city of Toronto when it comes to the transit file. This is a story the Star kind of went with this exclusive that somewhere along the line when it came to the issue, the debate, the ongoing debate over whether or not subways or LRTs would better serve the residents in Scarborough. It seems that there's this briefing note that was produced by the TTC and I guess public servants in the TTC for the mayor, and they selectively, I guess, presented the details or the facts in favor of a subway. And this has caught the ire of many who believe that this was not impartial and, in fact, was weighted, if I've got the story right. Now, Duff Conacher is the co-founder of Democracy Watch, and he thinks that this was, well, I won't put words in his mouth, but perhaps a betrayal of public trust and a stacked deck. Duff, let's get you in here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, all right. Did I get the story and more of the salient details right, at least?
Yes, and the question is whether these actions by some of the staff, and staff is, I think, a confusing word a bit to use for people. Really, you should call them public servants. They're not staff of councillors. Councillors do have their own staff.
Right.
These are the public servants, the public service of the city. And there's a public service bylaw, and the question is whether that bylaw has been violated.
All right, and how specifically violated?
Well, we don't know exactly what that bylaw means. Any law is just vague words on paper until the courts or some other judge-like position, in this case I think it's the ombudsperson of the city, until they actually decide where the lines are. The bylaw is just over a couple years old, which is a comment in and of itself. There were no real code of conduct in a lot of areas covering public service of the City of Toronto until just a couple of years ago. And that's way too late, given that the city has existed for more than 150 years. The country's existed for just coming up on 150 years.
All right, Duff, I guess the essential point here is that you want an impartial public service when it comes to preparing reports that the mayor and council would act upon.
Yeah, impartial and also providing full information and accurate information.
Okay, what the Star's piece, and I guess what you're saying is the piece that was prepared that the mayor took under advisement and certain councillors to proceed with a subway as opposed to the LRT was stacked in favor of a subway. So it sort of fudged the facts, or it weighted it inordinately towards the subway choice.
Yes, by including inaccurate information, it seems, and then highlighting that inaccurate information,
well, who then would have prepared this?
And again to the council.
All right, but who would have prepared that? Because it sounds
inaccurate, and also that there was huge caveats to what they were putting forward. So I think it's worth a look, and in part to clear up what are the duties of public service members, but also specifically to determine whether they didn't fulfill those duties as required by the Toronto Public Service Bylaw.
All right, and this is where Democracy Watch comes in. This is more or less your raison d'etre. Duff Conacher is with us. He's a co-founder of Democracy Watch. So in other words, then the mayor proceeds, and I guess the TTC and the councillors are all kind of colluding, in effect, to see that the subway goes through rather than the LRT being presented as a viable alternative or maybe the better option based on the information and the evidence, is what you're saying.
Yes, and the city councillors may take a real interest in one issue or another, or a lot of issues, but they do, as a practice, rely on the public service to provide them with accurate information, because that's what they're there to do, and the councillors don't necessarily have the time to gather that information.
Understood, sure. But it sounds to me then what we've got here is something that's agenda-driven, or it's almost propaganda, would you say?
I don't know whether anyone had an agenda, but they do have a duty generally it's termed in the public service to provide honest advice, and that means full information.
Well, why wouldn't they then?
Information. So,
was that an error of omission or commission?
it's hard to tell without an investigation, and that's why I think it merits an investigation. And we've heard back from one person in Toronto who's willing to proceed with a complaint. I don't think the Ombuds needs a complaint in order to proceed with an investigation, but if they do for this kind of particular case, because I know they've taken on systemic issues before on their own initiative, if the Ombuds office does need that, I believe there is someone in Toronto who is going to file a complaint.
All right, well, these things tend to happen from time to time. I mean, I've got people complaining about sole-sourced contracts that have happened, say, at the provincial level, or we had that whole Boardwalk Cafe imbroglio that came up several years back,
yes.
And these kinds of things. Is that a betrayal of true democracy and the process when it comes to these kinds of incidents?
Well, thankfully there is a bylaw now. Public servants play a key role. They have to be providing honest advice, the full information, without bias, or we have a really dangerous situation in terms of politicians being able to make decisions that uphold the public interest. If they're misled by public servants, then that misleading information can take on momentum, and all of a sudden you have a decision that's made that's not based on the truth, not based on reality, and if so, it's unlikely to solve a problem if it's actually made-up information saying a certain problem exists or that a certain solution is the best way to go. So they play a key role that's very, very important to safeguarding the public interest. And thankfully there's a public service bylaw that says they have to play this key role honestly, impartially, and providing full information to all councillors at this equally, not withholding information from certain councillors, not favoring any councillors, letting them all have the information, and letting the public have that honest information as well, so that the public can assess the information versus what the councillors decide to do.
Gotcha. Well, greater checks.
It seems to me, in my opinion, that wasn't done, and that's why the ombudsperson should investigate.
Right, and you've got that complaint that may take it a step further and beyond. Greater checks and screening necessary in the